Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Kraftchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to DATEABLE. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to another episode of DATEABLE.
We love this topic of attachment styles because we have very strong opinions about it. But for so long, attachment styles were treated as an illness, a problem, and you got to fix it, heal it before you can get into a relationship. And that was always sort of our problem with it.
And it also felt like, yes, you could change it, but how? Like, how do you just stop being more anxious? How do you stop being more avoidant? And I think this has been my biggest issue with attachment theory is it feels like you could label it, but then it kind of feels like not actionable.
Right.
Until now.
Until our guest today. She's going to give us some actionable things to do once you know your attachment style. Her name is Thais Gibson. You probably heard of her. She's an author, counselor, and founder of the Personal Development School, specializing in attachment theory and subconscious reprogramming.
And I love that she developed this method that's called the integrated attachment theory. And she has a new book, The New Attachment Theory, Heal Every Relationship by Rewiring Your Brain and Nervous System, that's coming out soon. And that's exactly what we go through is like, how do you actually rewire your patterns, your beliefs, your childhood wounds? It's all connected to attachment. And therefore, then you can see change. And she really gets detailed here. I know personally, I am actually starting to do some of this work because I feel like I've made a lot of strides in attachment, in securing my anxious attachment, but I do see it come up. It hasn't gone away completely. There's a lot of times where it has that ugly head that just resurfaces when you least expect it. And it doesn't go away even when you're in a long-term relationship or married.
Sometimes it could be even more amplified when you're deeply invested in a relationship or in someone. This is the first time after this conversation where I've truly made the connection between childhood wounds and how I'm wired for relationships. First time it clicked for me. Maybe I had to hear it a few different times, but the way Thais explains what childhood wounds are truly made sense for me for the first time ever.
Yeah, and she goes into these 5 pillars that start with identifying your own beliefs and needs and then learning how to meet them and regulate your nervous system before you can go to others. And I think that to me is something that I got really good at identifying my needs in a partner and really like tuning in, can they meet them? But less good at identifying my own needs for myself that don't even always have to do with a partner, or even in partnership, how can I meet my needs myself a little more than always relying on someone? Not to say that you should find a partner that can't meet your needs, but also recognizing that they may have their own opposing needs. People are human. Yes. They can't always do everything that you want on the timeline you want at the second you want.
This is such a great episode for anyone who's at any stage in your love journey, whether you're just dating, started dating someone new, you're in a relationship, you've been in a relationship for multiple decades. It doesn't matter because there's always work to be done. But Thais puts it in a way that doesn't feel like it's hard work. It feels like it's very doable and sustainable. And can I even say kind of fun?
We did ask her, we're like, okay, this feels like work. What's like the driving force that gets people to do it? And her response of like how you're living with so much anxiety and pain, and maybe if you're facing more of an avoidant tendency, it's like you want that love, but you can't bring yourself to get it. Like all of this adds up and is such painful experiences of us not being able to be in the types of relationships we want that it really makes the work seem like nothing than to live in something like that.
Yeah, it becomes part of your everyday life to address and to navigate your attachment style versus having this branded label all the time.
Right.
I'm just anxiously attached. This is who I am. Such a defeatist view. She really gives you the power back. So wonderful episode, wonderful conversation with Thais, and hopefully it's going to click for many of you like it did for us.
Definitely. Another way to get in touch with yourself, to reflect back your patterns, to do actionable change. I think this is something I've been kind of on this kick of like, what is active time versus passive time?
Yeah.
I'll have limited time, right? And I think about like in dating too, it's like there's the active time of like connecting with people and going on dates. And then there's all the passive time of like spinning your wheels and worrying and being anxious and overthinking and like all the stuff that's not actually going towards connection. So this conversation clearly really doubles down on that. But another great place is in our book, How to Be Dateable, the essential guide to finding your person and falling in love. And we wrote this because we want people to cut back on that passive time, the time that really drains you and doesn't actually move us to what we're looking for.
When we were writing this book, I think one of the biggest questions we were trying to answer was, so what? Like, yes, let's get to the self-awareness. Let's talk about your past and your patterns, but then the so what. And the so what in our book is what I'm so proud of as well, because you really do go away with some sort of plan, and that is not overwhelming. Like, it's very doable. And the best part right now is there's a big sale going on Amazon with our book. It's greatly reduced. So this is the best time to get it. Get a copy for yourself, get a copy for your neighbor, get a copy for your coworkers, whatever. Just be the Oprah of gift giving this month. You get a book, you get a book, you all get a book.
And we know some of you got audiobook and have said like, oh, maybe I should get hardcover too, because there's really cool illustrations in there. Not to pat myself on the back, but I will. And
Julie did them. That's what she's meaning.
But also, it is a different experience. We have different parts of the book that didn't make it to audio, but obviously audio has its benefits of hearing from us the way you do on this podcast. So if you got one and not the other, maybe this is the time to do the reverse since the sale is happening.
Yes.
Okay? So howtobedateable.com and then Amazon for that sale. Awesome. Before we get into it with Thais, let's hear a message from our sponsors. I'm so excited to tell you about our sponsor, Avocado Green Mattress. Their certified organic mattresses are specifically designed to relieve pressure points, support your body the way it needs, and help you actually get the deep restorative sleep you've been missing. Every mattress is made with thoughtfully sourced materials and built with real care, so you get incredible sleep night after night. When I invest in something for my home, I want it to last, but I also want it to feel amazing every day. My best friend has an avocado mattress and it is so comfortable. I swear I'm over there and I just want to take a nap. The best part is they're not only just good for you, they're good for the planet. Avocado products are made, not manufactured, thoughtfully crafted with real materials to deliver lasting comfort and support. Go to avocadogreenmattress.com/dateable to check out their mattress and furniture sale. That's avocadogreenmattress.com/dateable, avocadogreenmattress.com/dateable.
I've been doing a little spring reset with my closet lately, focusing more on quality over quantity. Just building a wardrobe of pieces that are well-made, versatile, and easy to reach for every day. And that's why I keep coming back to Quince. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are thoughtful, and the pricing actually makes sense. Quince makes beautiful everyday pieces using premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and super soft denim, with styles starting at just $50. So I've been on the hunt for the perfect pair of jeans. I don't want them to be skinny jeans, but I don't want them to be too wide-legged either. And let me tell you, I found the perfect pair at Quince. Their Bella Stretch Relaxed Straight jeans fit me like a glove. I look damn good in them, and they feel so comfortable and soft. They're my go-to jeans now. Refresh your spring wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable.
Okay, let's hear it from Thais Gibson.
So here's the thing. We often hear from you all that you want to feel super secure before you want to get into a relationship. So you want to like cure your anxious or avoidant behavior. But we have a different take with our guest today, Thais Gibson. How are you, Thais?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here with both of you.
We're excited because what we love about your work is there's so much on attachment theory, but you actually take it to a level that you can do something about it and not just dwell on it. Like I will forever remember like two of my friends just being at this party being like, are we doomed because we're fearful avoidance? Like, are we just like stuck and we'll never find love? So I love that you make attachment theory a bit more actionable.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely the main focus of my work. I actually was a fearful avoidant myself at one point. That's how I got into this. And a huge focus for me is like you should only really be looking at your attachment style to understand the underlying patterns so that you can rewire them and change. Because if you weren't dealt a healthy hand of cards in childhood and you grew up in a kind of environment or dynamic where things were difficult or challenging, that wires your brain in a certain way to play out these patterns, but you're not born with those patterns. They get wired into you and you can rewire them leveraging neuroplasticity. So that's like the entire focus of my work is how to find your attachment style and then change it.
How did you come to that conclusion, though? Because I think a lot of people read about attachment styles and they go, oh, I'm doomed. This is who I am. I'm doomed. Nothing I can do about it. But you are saying you can change and also you can be in relationships with your own attachment style the way it is. So what was that first step you took to knowing that there's something you can do about it?
So the very first thing that actually happened to me is I did a lot of work on, I was really interested in my entire life, especially as I went through like a bit of a healing journey myself. I was really interested in how spiritual concepts overlap with psychology and neuroscience. So it was like, okay, when somebody says meditate and you meditate and that actually seems to be making a big difference in your life, what is the psychology and science of why? And it's like, oh, it improves brain matter and strengthens the corpus callosum. And there's all these different things that happen. It helps move you into parasympathetic nervous system. So I really liked that space. And I originally started my work in a place of like, okay, well, what is our conditioning all about? And I focused with people before I ever visited anything to do with attachment styles. I ran a practice for quite a while on helping people first understand what big core wounds or triggers they had from their own childhood. So if there was this fear of abandonment or betrayal or being trapped or helpless or powerless or unsafe, like what were some of the conditioned patterns we had in childhood? And then I also I did 13 different certifications in like cognitive behavioral therapy and hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming and a lot of like the neuroscience of change, and got into a space of going, okay, well, this is really interesting. I can see here that people who have these big core wounds, they play these out in their adult lives. So we get imprinted at a subconscious level by these core wounds and we play them out as adults. So if you felt abandoned as a child, you're always playing out this fear of abandonment as an adult. And when somebody doesn't text you back or somebody's not calling you enough, you assume that and you project that onto your reality. So my original training was I did a PhD in pastoral counseling, then did 13 different certifications and all these sort of neuroscience-y things, and then got into a space of like, well, how do we change these things? And what I started was doing core wound work, so helping people rewire their core wounds, helping people understand their deepest unmet needs from childhood and how we can learn to meet them in ourselves. It's profoundly healing for people, how we can regulate our nervous system. And I just started there. And so I was working with people on just changing those things, really understanding like what is our childhood conditioning, how do we change it so we're not just like going through the same cycles and motions. Then after being in practice for a few years and after doing a lot of inner work prior to going into private practice with clients, I then got to a space of going, I'm now in a relationship, found myself in a relationship with my now husband. About 11 years ago we met and started dating him and was like, oh my gosh, I still have like communication work to do. I thought I had come all this way through healing my own childhood wounds. Exactly. Yeah. Through meeting my unmet needs and regulating my nervous system. And that gave me huge strides. Like I honestly don't think I was super capable of a healthy relationship prior to doing those first 3 pillars. But then met him and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm working with people on these 3 pillars, but like there's kind of more to this story, and realized that I still had this like residue of fearful avoidant attachment style, revisited attachment styles that I had learned about in like first year university psych class at a very high level. And because I was already in the business of change and how we change our brain, it was like, oh my gosh, if I know somebody's attachment style, it overlaps with this body of work I'm already creating, which is like, you tell me your attachment style, I already know what your core wounds are going to be. I already know your deepest unmet needs from childhood and how you have to heal them. I know how your nervous system's functioning. And then what I did is I tacked onto that how our communication patterns are. So like anxious attachment styles, they over communicate and sometimes try to soothe exclusively through others. Dismissive avoidance, they communicate a lot more through their actions instead of their words. So they just don't text back or don't call back. And that's their way of like setting a boundary or trying to communicate, which is obviously quite maladaptive. And then I understood how people were going to be with their boundaries. So anxious attachment styles are boundaryless, dismissive avoidance had extreme boundaries, fearful avoidance have this cycle where they're boundaryless until they get triggered enough. And then they set these extreme boundaries from anger and then they feel guilt about it and they go back to being boundaryless again. So they go sort of in this loop. So anyways, long story short, I got into the space of I was already focusing on how to help people change. And then I was like, oh my gosh, when I knew your attachment style, I know exactly what we need to change. And it was just a shortcut, a fast track. And that's where I really built this body of work, which we're calling the new attachment theory, integrated attachment theory, which is all about how we take our attachment style and then we understand the subconscious mind and neuroplasticity and how we rewire the patterns that were wired into us so that you are not just constantly playing out your childhood patterns on repeat, and so that you're not doomed if you went through a difficult childhood to be constantly going through these challenges. And that even applies to if you went through difficult relationships as an adult, because everything is conditioning us all the time. And whatever we're exposed to through repetition and emotion really fires and wires these neural pathways in our brain. And so if we get, if we go through difficult times, that doesn't have to be because it's our past that it becomes our future.
So fascinating, because I do think the core wounds, like I can identify with that. I think for me, finding out that anxious attachment was coming from a fear of abandonment was like that light bulb moment that went off that kind of changed everything for me. That I was able to, like, first of all, address it and figure out, like, where is this coming from? Like, why do I fear this with like someone I just met, for instance? Like, why am I jumping to this fear of abandonment? And then also it was helped me really figure out that like consistency in a partner was a priority because I needed someone that, wouldn't trigger this fear of abandonment. I guess like my question for you, because I think I'm still struggling with this, is like, there's nothing in my childhood that points to like this huge abandonment. And I still am not really sure like where this came from fully. Like, how do you help people walk through where this is coming from and how it impacts adult relationships today?
Okay, perfect. So really good question. And maybe I'll go through just as a pre sort of piece here, what core wounds are, just for maybe listeners too. Mm-hmm. So I always give people the analogy that your core wounds are like your own personal version of the bear in the woods. Like if you go into the woods tomorrow and you see a bear and you run away and thank goodness you're safe, but then you have to go back into the woods the next day. Well, what does your mind do? Your mind is like, you hear the trees move and you're like, the bear is coming. So what happens is we get imprinted and our subconscious mind has a negativity bias. It's wired to hang on to negative things more than positive so that it can protect ourselves from them. And like if you're being chased by the bear and you get back home, you don't go tell your friends and family like, oh my gosh, this bear was chasing me and I saw the most beautiful flowers. Like you don't remember these external things. You're like the bear's teeth and its claws. So we hang on to negative things more than positive. And that's a biological evolutionary mechanism. That's how we've actually like been able to, protect ourselves and survive. So different attachment styles have different core wounds. The anxious attachment style I've discovered is not just fear of abandonment. Okay. That's sort of like the very high level. It's a fear of abandonment. Their biggest core wounds as a whole are fear of abandonment, being alone, disliked, excluded, rejected, not good enough, unloved, and unsafe if somebody pulls away. These are very solvable problems. We're able to rewire these things. But when people look at like the cost of these things, these are the things that wreak havoc on our lives. These are the things that like cause us to spiral or spin out or call too much or whatever it might be. Dismissive avoidance, a lot of their core wounds, just to juxtapose so people can see it. Theirs are around feeling defective or shamed, especially if they're criticized, weak if they open up, this deep feeling of not belonging, because I think they really struggle to emotionally connect in that deeper way, feeling unsafe in a conflict. They don't really like conflict. They tend to shut down and retreat. And then obviously the fear of being trapped or helpless or powerless or not good enough. Okay, so they have very different wounds, as you can see. Fearful avoidants have their own unique set of wounds. They have a little bit of both sides there, but also big core wound of betrayal that we discovered in our work, and big core wound of feeling bad. Like they always got sort of criticized or punished for things that maybe weren't that big of a deal. Like if you grow up in childhood and you're constantly being punished for like spilling something and people get really mad at you, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just in trouble all the time for anything. And then we're kind of like constantly walking on eggshells trying to prove your innocence. Like, oh my gosh, I'm good. I promise. I swear. I just spilled the water. It's okay. So anyway, so we go through these experiences, we project them back out. So to go back to now your original question, how does this work for an anxious attachment style? Well, the really interesting part of when we look at conditioning and how it functions is that we get conditioned through repetition and emotion. Okay. So we can have these acute experiences. Like somebody can go their whole life and feel really safe driving a car and have one painful experience where they get into a car wreck. Maybe they're fine, but it gives them a big scare. But how intense the emotion is, if something is intensely emotional, it can create an immediate imprint on the subconscious mind. Okay. We like deeply store it. And then somebody can get back into the car after years of driving and their hands shake when they get back into the car to drive the next day. Okay. So we can have what we call more acute experiences or big T trauma. And these are the typical typical things you think of when you hear abandonment, okay? These are, oh my gosh, mom left and never came back, or came from a divorced home, or, things happened where somebody deeply abandoned me, they were gone. Of course, that's like what we think of when we hear abandonment. But small t trauma, if it's repeated enough across time, has a very similar impact. So if somebody goes through what we call perceived abandonment repeatedly enough, then that also fires and wires the same neural networks across time. So a lot of repetitive small t trauma can have a very similar output and imprint over time as one singular big T trauma, okay? So what does perceived abandonment look like? Well, some examples would be, and this is very common, you have one parent who's really warm and available, and another parent who's just a little bit retreated and kind of more avoidant or emotionally unavailable. And so the juxtaposition is you're with one parent and you feel like there's love, and you're with the other parent and you feel like love is taken away. And then if we constantly fear love being taken away, then that creates a sense of abandonment. Another example could be that you have very loving parents, but those parents are constantly working a lot and you're left with the grandparents or the babysitter. And again, there's this repeated, when children really need to rely on their parents, there's this repetition of love is there, love is taken away. Love is there, love is taken away. And of course, that primes the subconscious mind to perceive that as a threat and then project out, oh my gosh, will love be taken away? Will I be abandoned? And if that's repeated enough across time, that still can create anxious attachment style. So those are a couple of examples that can be there. Of course, there could be many other ones, but those are some that people most often relate to.
That's helpful. I have like light bulbs going off like I passed from that.
I think what's misleading is the word wounds. Like you were abused as a child. And I think
it feels
Julie
so big.
and I, we've always struggled with this because we're like, our childhoods were fine. I mean, I had a great childhood, but now the way you just defined it, it really is just all of our childhood experiences and how that affected our nervous system in some ways. And then we carry those experiences into adulthood, which so like for everybody listening, yes, all of our parents fucked up, but in an equal way, So I don't think this is about blaming our parents in any way.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is only $2.50. So you can get your gym gains on or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
I think it's not even fucked up because it just feels like so much of it's just human, right? Is like people just don't know. Like I'm just thinking of like the examples you used of like one person, maybe like a parent that's like always there. Maybe they had more capacity because they're not the one at work, for instance. Like some of it's just not even a fuck up, just, contextual. I guess like I'm just thinking about this too. We obviously have a lot of people that are trying to heal their childhood wounds, but we also have people here that are parents or trying to become parents. Like what thoughts do you have for someone that like doesn't want to necessarily imprint some of this stuff on their children, but also, is human?
Yeah. So I love what we both said, which is that when you go through life, like, of course, your parents are always doing the best they can with what they know at the time. And there's just a lot of, there's an old saying that like, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think there used to be a lot more community, a lot more support. We used to have society functioning in a different way where it looked different. We experienced things differently. There was more support for people. And now, often we have both parents working because financially a lot of people are forced to be in that position. And then you have situations where both parents are limited in their capacity and they're probably doing the best that they can and being the best version of parents. And so it's definitely not to blame the parents. And the second part is you can kind of use the word, I use the word interchangeably all the time, core wounds with core beliefs. So it's just a belief we adopt. Oh, love will be taken away. Oh gosh, this person will pull away from me. I might be abandoned. So in that particular case, when you think of wounds, it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing. We can also use the term core beliefs. And the last thing, just to touch on before I go into the exact answer to your question, is that a lot of people do a lot of this nervous system regulation work, which I love. It's one of our pillars of healing. Nervous system work is such an important piece when it comes to actually healing and changing. But what's really interesting is we have to ask ourselves, well, what is dysregulating the nervous system? And when you look at what's dysregulating the nervous system, like what is signaling for us to move from parasympathetic nervous system mode or ventral vagal nervous system, that open, social, connectable part of our nervous system when we're in this healthy parasympathetic state, into either dorsal vagal shutdown where we're completely retreated, or into full-on sympathetic nervous system where we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. What is causing that to happen? Well, why is it that one person in an experience isn't having the same output as another person? Like maybe one person doesn't text back an avoidant and they're fine with it and their nervous system's totally regulated and they're good, and somebody doesn't text back somebody more anxious and they panic and they go into full-blown sympathetic nervous system mode. It's actually because of those core beliefs. So what happens in general is that you have a stored wound or belief, okay, which could be, I'm going to be abandoned, love's going to be taken away. You don't hear from somebody. Our subconscious mind goes, well, what do we know about not hearing from somebody or somebody pulling away? Oh my gosh, I could be abandoned. We subconsciously project that out. We're not necessarily consciously aware that this is happening. We're not consciously choosing, oh, I'm going to tell myself that I could be abandoned, right? That's not a conscious choice. So we project out this subconscious idea. Then that belief, as it starts getting projected out, causes a tailspin of thoughts. We start thinking thoughts like, are they going to come back? Was it my fault? Did I do something wrong? Are they okay? Are they even safe? Did something bad happen to them? You think all these thoughts. Those thoughts create emotional output, okay? Then you feel stressed, anxious, worried. Emotions are essentially made up of neurochemical reactions like cortisol, norepinephrine, and now those neurochemical reactions are now signaling to your body that you are unsafe, and then that moves us into an upregulated state like sympathetic nervous system mode, and now you're in this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And so it's really interesting too, like a lot of people do the nervous system work. That's such an important pillar, but when we go a little deeper to the root, it's actually about rewiring these beliefs so that we get to the root of the matter, so that we're not constantly projecting these things and then trying to re-regulate our nervous system. So those two things go very much hand in hand. So in terms of parenting, what can somebody do? So many parents end up going, oh my gosh, I have so many friends who are recent parents, and they call me and they're like, I accidentally raised my voice at my child, and they're like,
I'm going to traumatize them for life.
Did I ruin their attachment style? And the reality is it's repetition and emotion over time. So parents, of course, are going to be imperfect. Parents are going to lose their cool or their temper. It's normal. It's human. So it becomes the ratio of things. So essentially, if you see somebody who raises their voice and they lose their cool and they're having a stressed out day, and they do that, but that's not the norm. That's the exception to the rule. That's where it's like, okay, children are going to be okay. And in fact, optimal growth occurs at the border between support and challenge. So when children have a little bit of tough love or a little bit of challenge, it's sometimes healthy for them or okay for them. Of course, this doesn't mean like abusive words and being really mean or harsh, but if somebody gets a little bit, frustrated sometimes and a child has to kind of reflect or take accountability, it's not always this really, really negative thing. It's when we get into a ratio where it becomes problematic. So if somebody's sort of 60-40, losing their cool all the time, being frustrated with the child, or 60-40 available and then really unavailable, that's where we start having more of these problems, okay? So the ratio matters, number one. Number two, well, what makes kids secure? How do we actually help children to be secure? What's that ratio? It's like ratio of what? What does that look like? Well, this is essentially about number one, attunement. This is literally the number one characteristic that impacts whether or not a child becomes secure, because when parents are emotionally attuned, what ends up taking place is a child feels like, oh, my parents are available for me. They're here to literally be present with me. If I'm stressed, they come towards me and try to actually figure out why I'm stressed and support me through that. And what that also means in turn is that children learn my emotions are safe to be seen and heard. It's safe to express myself and I'll get well received. I can trust other people will be there for me. I'm worthy of love on my good days and on my hard days or in my hard moments. And all of this conditioning plays out where they learn, okay, I can lean on people. I can rely on people. It's safe to be vulnerable. I can talk about things. And because this then becomes a part of their conditioning as they grow older and older, this turns into a space where suddenly they feel like, okay, I know how to do this. I receive this. And so they naturally know how to give it to others because part of their conditioning is that it was modeled to them. And now all of a sudden, sudden we have children who are much more likely to be secure because they've had this attunement. But what we're really looking for, if we had to nail it down to 5 things, is beyond attunement, we're looking for an absence of core wounds. So an absence of these traumatic experiences. If those are there, we can definitely talk about how to rewire or change those. Needs that are met in a child's life, where a child feels comfortable expressing their needs. A child being in a safe enough environment that their nervous system is regulated. And children who have boundaries that are honored and they have healthy modeling for communication. And if we get these 5 things, these are the 5 pillars that we actually work on helping people become securely attached if they're not. And we can do the rewiring work.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
like, can you do that as an adult? Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So one of the first things, and we can start with the first pillar, is like the core wounds piece.
Okay.
So on this pillar, one of the first things that really matters is that a lot of people hear, oh, I have this core wound or this core belief. Let me just do affirmations. And I am not a believer in affirmations personally, and I'll tell you why. Because affirmations are the conscious mind speaking to the conscious mind. So nobody is consciously choosing these core wounds. Nobody's waking up in the morning and saying, oh, today I'm going to tell myself all day that I'll be abandoned and see how I feel. Or like no one's choosing that. So what happens is sometimes we do affirmations and people will be like, I'm going to do affirmations. And what they end up doing is the wound or the belief exists at the subconscious level of mind. Okay. Your subconscious mind is essentially the warehouse of all of your conditioning. And it actually stores all of our experiences. It consolidates them a little bit over time, but it stores them all. And so what ends up happening is we have individuals who go, okay, they have these deep subconscious fears, and the subconscious mind does not speak language. It doesn't speak in language at all. It doesn't really hear language. For example, if I were to say to you, whatever you do not think of a pink elephant. Probably flash an image of a pink elephant. Your conscious mind, yeah. So your conscious mind hears do not, but your subconscious mind, it just flashes an image. Okay. So before your conscious mind can even register the do not part. So your subconscious mind doesn't speak in language, but it speaks in emotions and images. So how do we now leverage emotion and imagery so that we can speak to our subconscious mind? Well, every memory we ever have is just a container of emotions and images. In other words, if you look at some of your experiences, if you were to say your favorite childhood memory and you were going to go, oh my gosh, it was me playing at the beach with my parents, and both of you are saying that to, okay, it was this, you would see the images of the waves and the sand and maybe the little sand castle you were building. And we have all seen people when they recall old memories, they smile or they laugh because that memory literally elicits emotion when we remember it. So memory is a container of emotions and images. So now we know we can leverage memory to speak to our subconscious mind. So what do we do? So we have 3 steps to rewire. Step 1, pick the wound. Let's say it's I'm not good enough. I am good enough. Step 2, I now need repetition for firing and wiring of emotions and imagery. In other words, I need repeated memories, okay, of how I am good enough. So what we do is we ideally come up with 10 memories of times we actually felt good enough. The more specific, the better, because the more specific we get, the more we elicit emotions and images. So you might say, for example, I was a great friend last week when, a friend of mine was in need and I showed up. I felt really good about myself because I was resilient a couple weeks ago when I had to turn things in at that hard deadline. I still showed up and I did that work, or I had to break through that hard barrier that I was facing and I grew through that. So we come up with 10 memories of times we felt good enough. Ideally, the more specific, the better. Okay. Yeah. And then step 3, we record it down. Okay. So we record ourselves saying those things out loud, ideally like into our phone or somewhere we can listen back. And we listen back for 21 days in what we call a suggestible state. And what that means is when your brain is producing more alpha and theta brainwaves. This is what happens in the first hour that you wake up, the last hour before you go to sleep, after meditation, after doing nervous system regulation work. And now what's happening is when your brain is producing more of those brainwaves, we are more open to suggestion. In other words, our subconscious mind is sponging everything in at a more rapid pace. So now we have this little 2 to 5 minute process a day where we wake up in the morning. Maybe you get up 5 minutes earlier. You snooze your alarm and you sit there and you put on your recording and you are literally focusing on seeing and visualizing and feeling about the times you were good enough, the specific memory. So it's getting to the subconscious level of mind, the 10 of them. So we're getting repetition to fire and wire those neural pathways. And we're doing this across 21 days. And research shows that across 21 days in a suggestible state, that is when neural pathways become strong enough that they are highly likely to stick. And so those core wounds that are wreaking havoc on your life, that are causing you to feel really anxious in relationships, or to push people away, or to sabotage, or to fear betrayal, or always be on high alert, or cause your nervous system to get really upregulated into the sympathetic state, those are solvable problems simply by doing this 2 to 5 minute exercise every morning. That's a great place to start in the rewiring process.
I love that so much.
You know how they say we heal each other in relationships? Is there a way for us to help our partners heal their childhood wounds?
This is an excellent question. So this is a double-edged sword, okay? The answer to this is yes, and it's actually a really important process I teach for parents with their kids. So if you know, for example, that you have a child who's not good enough, I say like, give them ample evidence every day of how they're good enough. Give them specific things. Oh, that was so good. Look at how well you did. Really speak to that so they see it, so they feel about it. And that really helps if you know that your children have core wounds, but becomes a bit of a slippery slope if we know that our partners have core wounds, because there's a part where it's like, where is the line between supporting somebody and doing the work versus doing the work for them, which then becomes enabling and somewhat codependent. Right. And so what I always say is, look, if you know somebody has a wound, it is great to be very healthily considerate. If you know, for example, somebody is always afraid of being trapped, speak into how you respect their freedom. You honor their independence. You want to make decisions together. You're not forcing them to do anything unilaterally. Like, speak into the things where you know they're likely to get triggered, and that's healthy for communication. It's a great communication tool. But if you were going to sit there and you're going to be like, okay, I got to give my partner 10 pieces of evidence today that they're this, then arguably we go into like almost playing the parental role with our partner, which is not what we want. So I always say, look, be mindful, be respectful. Like, you love your partner, you care about them, do what you can to feed into what you see in them. If they don't see those things in themselves, that's just that's coming from a place of love. But if we're doing it to like rewire them, then we're taking on, it's like I always say people are 50%, each person is 100% responsible for their 50% of the relationship. And we kind of like went too much into their 50%. Yeah. And that actually moves us into codependency. And that usually has some pretty strong downsides to it.
So this is the first one. Rewiring your core beliefs. What's the next one?
Yes. So the next one is meeting your deeply unmet needs. One of my favorite quotes ever is from Dr. Gabor Mate, because it really exemplifies this. And he says, trauma are the things that happen to you that shouldn't have happened, like having core wounds because you had traumatic things, big T or small t repeated trauma. Okay. But trauma are also the things that didn't happen that should have in an ideal world. Okay. So for example, children in a perfect world, they are able to be safe. They are able to feel seen. They are able to feel special, right? And if children don't get access to feeling safe or to feeling seen, then we may have a dynamic where, okay, now this child grows up and they have this deeply unmet need. And if they're constantly feeling unsafe in their world, then obviously that's a traumatic event. Or another example, if you look at a dismissive avoidant, is they usually had more childhood emotional neglect. They didn't really feel seen. They didn't really feel special. They didn't really feel catered to. And what happens, which is so interesting, is our conditioning from childhood more than anything formulates the relationship we have to ourselves. So in other words, you're going to see that if somebody grows up and they have this deep childhood conditioning where they felt really unseen, guess who doesn't see their emotions as an adult? Them. Right? Dismissive avoidance, they never see themselves or their emotions. So, and you look at it too, if people fear abandonment, they end up abandoning themselves all the time to people please others. So we end up playing out this conditioning in the relationship to self, which means the second pillar of healing is I always get people to write a little column down their page. We have these little exercises in the personal development school, and it's like mom, dad. And there's a line down the page, and it's like, you write your deepest unmet needs from mom, of no judgment to mom. You meet your deepest unmet needs from dad. Okay. No judgment to dad. Just obviously our parents are doing the best they can with what's available to them at the time. And maybe you didn't feel protected by dad. Maybe you didn't feel seen by mom or empathized with or supported or appreciated, whatever it is, write them down. Okay. And then we get people to go pull from this needs bucket where there's this list of like big childhood unmet needs. And your job is to become a master at meeting those needs in the relationship to yourself. And what that means is that you're going to do this across a 21-day cycle. Okay. So if you didn't feel protected, you are going to become your own protector. And what you're doing is you're filling this void of things you didn't get access to in your own life and childhood experiences. And so, becoming your own protector, what does that look like? It looks like regulating your nervous system regularly so you feel safe in your own body. It also looks like setting boundaries wherever you go, being masterful at assertiveness so that you don't go through life unprotected because you're boundaryless. It looks like making sure that you are in a safe place where you've got support systems in your life and organizing those things. And you've got a financial plan in your life that makes you feel safe. So we go into resourcing in our own lives personally, the things that we never had access to in our childhood. And as we do that through repetition over time, that becomes our new normal, our new set point. It rewires that set point at a subconscious level. And now literally we are undoing what was done to us, or in this pillar, not really done for us, so that we essentially, as cheesy as it sounds, healing becomes when we become our own parents.
That's fascinating. I mean, I think for me, identifying my needs in a partner and in a relationship was huge. Like that was huge work. I've never done the exercise you did about the parents, and I want to do it because that's like another level. But I think one thing that I've struggled with, and I'm curious your take on this, is sometimes when you go from suppressing your needs so much and then realizing them, you almost like overcorrect so that you're like overly assertive or with boundaries too. We see this all the time in dating. It's like, again, boundaries are a good thing, but like if you're putting up like roadblock after roadblock just to get to know the person, that can also be a big challenge. What's your take on the balance of this?
Okay, so I love this so much. So when we go through our 5 pillars, it's like do your core wounds, learn to meet your own needs, regulate your nervous system, and then communication and boundaries, okay? The reason we do these 2 first is because exactly to your point, if we don't learn to meet our deepest unmet needs, we will always try to over-resource from others the things that we struggle to resource in ourselves. And so what's happening out in the world are people are learning to identify their needs from other people. And if you do not know how to meet your own needs halfway, it's like you have a hole in your bucket. And so somebody pours into your bucket, and let's say you need approval or validation, and you're like, oh, I need this in a relationship. I need encouragement. I need somebody to be, words of affirmation, very affirmative. That's what I'm looking for. And what ends up happening is your subconscious mind works very hard to maintain its comfort zone because it equates what's familiar to safe, and thus we're likely to survive. And so what ends up taking place is if we do not have a subconscious comfort zone, in other words, if we're not primed to validate ourselves, if we're always criticizing ourselves instead, then what happens is somebody comes along and they validate you or appreciate you or these things that you're looking for that you tell them. And it's almost like they pour into your bucket and there's a hole. It leaks right back out. And now we're like, my partner always needs to be available. They need to be validating me all the time. I will not put up with a partner who doesn't validate me. And we put all this pressure on people to do it for us because we don't know how to self-source. And so now we have an imbalance that we have to course correct for. And you'll see this with every attachment style. Anxious attachment styles, they generally struggle to self-soothe. So they have this kind of like subconscious expectation that like people always need to be there for me and soothe for me and do it for me. If you look at dismissive avoidance, they're like, they don't know how to understand their own emotions and communicate them. So they're like, I shouldn't have to explain myself. People should just get it. They should understand my need for freedom and independence. And fearful avoidance, they very much struggle to trust. And so they're like, people better never break my trust. There better never be an incongruency in something that they say or do. And what that all is we put excess pressure on other people to do for us what we haven't learned and healed within ourselves first. So that's why we go back into our childhood first on pillar number 2. We actually resource these things in the relationship to ourselves. Now we've learned to fill the hole in our bucket, and now we can properly receive from other people without this overcorrection or overcompensation. And so now when we go into trying to communicate our needs, which is a later pillar, and we get into how to properly communicate, because a lot of people don't communicate properly, then we get into a space where it's like you can actually articulate yourself properly, and it's not coming from this place of pressure and expectation and honestly sometimes desperation. Because, I always say to people too, if you have no idea how to meet your own needs and you learn your needs and you're like, now my partner's going to meet them for me and do it for me, it's also like you're going to pull into a gas station and your tank is fully running on empty and you're like, this gas station better be open. And if the gas station's not open, you're like panicking. And now we don't communicate well and we don't show up appropriately in how we communicate. And sometimes we kind of panic when we're saying it. And so it's like, no. You got to be topping off your gas tank all the time. And we actually feel the best and are the best at receiving from other people when we filled our gas tank part way and we're not coming from this place of panic or fear or desperation.
But what about tipping the other way? Can you become too over-resourced yourself that you no longer need other people to fill your needs? Like, I don't need to communicate my needs to any of my partners because I can do all of that on my own now.
Great question. So here's how this tends to work, okay? So what we'll see is when we go through the pillars, the first 3 pillars are let me rewire my core wounds, let me learn to meet my needs, let me rewire my nervous system and practice getting into parasympathetic nervous system and doing somatic processing work. Those are our first 3 pillars, and those are very much about relationship to self. So now we've done this pre-work to go and have the ability to do our next 2 pillars about relationship with others properly, okay? So what we're looking for at the end of the day is we were looking for interdependence. Anything at either extreme is too imbalanced. For example, codependency is at one end of the spectrum. You better always be there for me, do it all for me, always know my boundaries without me saying them, always meet my needs without me needing to ask for them. That can be very codependent and problematic. At the flip end of the spectrum, we have too much counterdependency, which is I never have to rely on anybody. I don't want to let anybody in. I'm going to need nobody at all and trust nobody. And that comes from a lot of our core wounds. Usually it's like if I rely on people, I'll be disappointed and I'll be let down and feel helpless, or I'll be rely on somebody and they won't pull through and I'll be trapped, or I'm going to rely on somebody and be betrayed, right? So that counterdependent side usually comes from our core wound. So doing the core wound work first actually helps a lot to come out of that hyper independence or counterdependency. But that's why we still do those pillars in order, is now that I know my needs from my childhood, from my experiences, and know what they are in relationships, now that I'm more regulated, so I'm less likely to be super triggered when I'm trying to communicate them, because it's hard to communicate very well to somebody when you're like, you really think they're leaving you any second, right? It's very difficult. So when we've worked through our core wounds, we know our needs, we've regulated our nervous system, we're literally aiming for interdependence, which means I am a master at knowing my needs and how to meet them and showing up for myself and regulating myself. And I am also a master at being vulnerable, at communicating properly, where I can actually get seen and heard and where I can lean on and rely on other people. And what we actually take people through in our programs is we try to literally get them to that middle ground where it's like, here they are, they're somewhere in the center, they have access to both sides very effectively. And that's what we're actually vetting for. And so that brings us to the next piece, which is now that you've done the first 3 pillars, now you're prepared to communicate properly, because you can't communicate properly when you're super triggered or when you don't know what your needs are, or when your nervous system's in super overdrive and you're just trying to get a need met. So that brings us into that communication piece. And a lot of people will say exactly what you said, like, well, what if I do the first 3 pillars right and then I don't want to, rely on people, or I don't need people at all? It's the opposite. Once we feel safe in ourselves, once we feel like we're not triggered all the time, vulnerability becomes normal for us because it's a normal part of our human functioning. The ability to communicate becomes natural for us. And of course, we'll want to lean on and connect with other people because we're literally biologically wired for those things. So we're just getting the first 3 dysfunctional places that we may be coming from out of the way, turning them to very adaptive ways of being. And then it makes going into the next pillars to do that work on really healthy communication, really getting seen and heard. It makes those next pieces much easier.
Let's hold that thought because we have a quick message from our sponsors.
Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home, and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
We talk a lot on Dateable about being present in dating, but let's be real. That's hard when your phone is basically a third wheel. Enter Brick. Brick is a simple device that helps you put your phone down when you actually want to be in the moment. You just pair your phone to Brick and it locks you out of distracting apps, and suddenly you're not doom scrolling while your date is telling a story about their childhood dog. Whether you're on a first date, having a real conversation, or just trying to stop checking your phone every 30 seconds, Brick creates boundaries with your tech without asking you to delete everything or go full digital detox. Dating is about connection, not notifications. So if you want to be more present and honestly more attractive, check out Brick. Go to getbrick.app/dateable to get 10% off. That's getbrick.app/DATEABLE to get 10% off.
Before we get into the communication and the actual relating to others bit, I'm curious about just regulating your nervous system, because that's such a buzzword nowadays. You hear regulate your nervous system, but what does that actually mean to you? And how are the different attachment styles wired currently, and what unique things can each of them do?
Yeah, great question. So all 3 insecure attachment styles are all coming from a place of spending too much time in sympathetic nervous system mode. So if you look, we have sympathetic being fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Anxious attachment styles spend a lot of time fawning. Okay. They really spend a lot of time fawning. They're almost in this hyper fawn mode all the time. If you look at dismissive avoidance, they spend a lot of time in freeze mode. They're not just in sympathetic, they're also in a form of parasympathetic when we look at it from a polyvagal theory perspective. The nervous system has, in a parasympathetic mode, kind of 2 branches. We have ventral vagal, which is when we feel open and sociable and connectable and safe, and we're sort of that best version of ourselves. And then we have dorsal vagal, which is sometimes termed as dorsal vagal shutdown. And it's when somebody kind of numbs out, retreats, they go into themselves, they don't really know how to be available. And what we're trying to do is come out of this sympathetic state and dorsal vagal state, which if you can imagine are sort of like the upper end of a ladder and the lower end. And we're trying to get into this middle ground, which is sometimes referred to as our window of tolerance, aka ventral vagal mode. This is a really big topic. Like there's a lot of things we can do proactively, but there's also things we can do in real time that are going to help us move out of distressed emotions. But I'll give one tool here that's a high level. Okay. So we have the obvious. We have proactively moving through different nervous system modes. So we have proactively doing things like daily meditation, breath work, mindfulness practices, things that are actually getting your body to practice being in your window of tolerance and feel safe within that. Okay. And that's great to do. I highly recommend doing those things first thing in the morning or last thing before bed, because you are also more suggestible in that state. So your mind and body at a subconscious level are getting more used to being in that mode, and it's sort of patterning it in a deeper way. However, what do you do when you are triggered in real time and your nervous system is dysregulated? Well, then we go through different exercises that are helping us move through completion cycles, aka get back into our window of tolerance. I could go through that in a really long way, but I'll just give a high level one for now because it would take for a little while.
Okay, another episode,
So very high level is that when we move through our life and experiences, one of the best studies that I've ever seen to articulate this is researchers took a whole bunch of participants, they put them into fMRI scanners, and they had them go through and express a triggering event. So they had them recall a really triggering event. So maybe when they were abandoned or cheated on or went through a really hard past event in a marriage or relationship, childhood, and they watched what happened to their brains when this took place, when they were recalling these triggering events. And if you look at the brain at a high level from the top down, we have like our neocortex regions of the brain, then we have our limbic system, and then we have the reptilian brain. And what researchers found is the neocortex's regions, like our prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical, rational thinking. And what they found is when somebody was really triggered, all of this brain activity basically drained out of the neocortex regions of the brain and went right into, as you can imagine, the reptilian brain. Because when we're triggered, we kind of become this like reptilian primitive version of ourselves. And they had them go through, keep telling the story. They see all this brain activity light up in the reptilian brain. And then the researchers go, okay, well, now instead of telling me this story about your experiences, I want you to instead sit down, pause. They're still in the fMRI scanner, so they're like laying there. And they say, okay, I want you to pause. And I want you to tell me what emotions you're feeling. I want you to label the emotion. And I want you to witness what that feels like in your body, what sensations you're experiencing. So for example, participants would say, I feel anger, and anger feels like heat in my chest and cold going down my arms and wrists, and my jaw is clencing and tensing. And they had them sit in that for 30 to 60 seconds and go through these cycles of really being in their body, noticing their emotions, and just simply recognizing those sensations. And then what they had them do is, as they went through that experience, what they saw, which was super interesting, is all this brain activity light back up in the neocortex regions of the brain again. And so now we have individuals who also reported their triggering being a lot less. Why? Because they've stepped out of telling the story of what Bob did to them 20 years ago and how this happened and how dare he. They came out of that. They went into their body. That's what emotions are. Okay. Emotions are a reflection of the mind in the body. They are like literal sensations in our body. That's all they are at the end of the day, really. And they have people get present with their sensations. It helps regulate their nervous system, calm them down, and it helps their prefrontal cortex and other neocortex regions of the brain come back online. So now we're back to having the ability to access more logical and rational responses. Now there's more we can do here to actually complete the cycle, like, pressing our hands down on things if we feel angry, or things that are helping to sort of discharge some of this emotion, or shaking things off, because what we're actually doing through things like shaking is discharging excess cortisol so that our body can better process it. So there's other things we can do from there, but at a high level, the ability to practice when you are triggered, witnessing your emotion instead of getting so attached to it and overwhelmed by it, and noticing, what is this emotion? What does it feel like in my body? It takes us out of the story into our bodies, and it helps bring that emotional charge down. So that's a really good practice. And we work with people in our programs to do those practices when they're triggered, but also proactive practices to regulate their nervous system so they're more used to being in that window of tolerance or ventral vagal nervous system mode.
It sounds very scary to confront your emotions like that, right? To like actually feel them in your body. Do you recommend for people when they go through this that they're not alone? Like, is there a best environment for someone to try this?
Great question. So the first thing we do, when I share about this, it's like what we do in our program. So we actually have them led. So we have these classes, people go through them there. We have counselors or facilitators are there to lead them, guide people through the process. So we have that. But also, I want to make sure that people also are aware that while it's important to have support and to resource that, It's also important to notice that we kind of are quite dissociative as people. I think people hear the word dissociation, they're like, dissociation, and they think it's like this out-of-body experience where you can't find your way back to yourself and you're like catatonic, but it's not. Like, we dissociate the moment we feel stress in our bodies and we scroll through social media repeatedly as a way of trying to cope. Or we feel stress in our bodies on our way home from work and we turn on the television and we zone out and watch television for hours because we don't want to deal with how we're feeling. So, I don't want people to be afraid of connecting to their emotions, but what we recommend is if people are going to do it at home, that we titrate it. Okay. So the whole point is you don't start with like some big painful event. If you're feeling the emotion in your body when you're triggered, you have one of two paths. You're either going to dissociate and act. We either witness our emotions or get possessed by them. If you witness them, it brings down the emotional charge. If you don't witness them, they overtake you and you act through them. Okay. So in other words, if somebody's really angry and they don't go into feeling their emotions in their body and sit with that, they usually yell or raise their voice or send an angry email that they regret later. So you kind of have one of two paths. At least when you practice witnessing your emotions, as confronting as it is, it allows you to stop the cycle of the painful or maladaptive behavior that would then follow that. And so I still would say like, hey, it's important that we practice witnessing and just noticing emotions or sensations in the body. But if you've never done it before, it can be a little bit challenging when you're triggered to do it. So what we get people to do is we titrate it. So we say, okay, pick like something that happened to you where you felt minorly irritated. Okay, let's practice going through that. What does that feel like in your body? So we familiarize ourselves with the process first with small, low-level emotions like irritation, annoyance, maybe very low-level anxiety, mild frustration, a tiny bit of sadness or worry, like these much lower-level emotions. They get comfortable doing this. They become masterful at it. And then when something's actually happening in real time, that's how they're stepping out and breaking that cycle. So it's a really, really great question.
I know we're going to go into like now you're relating to another human. This first part was all about you. I guess a logistics question. Do you recommend, I know you mentioned a couple times 21 days, and I know that's like the time it takes to form a habit. Do you recommend doing each one of these 3 parts separately in 21 days or doing them at the same time?
Great question. So we say 21 days. We ideally start with the core wounds. And as we're getting into the core wound space where we're like, oh my gosh, I know how to rewire my core wounds. We can keep doing that in the background. So what we get people to do in our programs, they start doing that. Once they have a couple core wounds that they move through and they get it, then we go into our needs. Even though if you have more than 1 or 2 core wounds, which most people have kind of like 5 major ones, then you start doing multiple at a time, maybe 2 a day. And you've done your first 2. Now you can move on to the next pillar, but you just keep your morning routine of that 2 to 5 minutes to work on your next core wounds. Then we go into needs. And yes, now we're meeting our needs every day for that 21-day period. Then we'll usually hit this natural flow of like, okay, we've really moved through a lot of core wounds. Great. Let's now do our nervous system work in the morning instead of the core wounds work, but we're still meeting our needs. So we're sort of, they have overlap, if that makes sense, in the way we take people through. And then it allows us to get those first 3 pillars really regulated. And now we can move into the communication and boundaries.
And then I guess last question before we move into that next part, I could hear people just being like, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work I need to do on myself. But you obviously touched on why this is important in dating and relationships and life in general. I guess what other reminders do you have for people of like, why am I doing this in the first place to have healthy relationships?
Okay, great question. It is broken down so it's 2 to 5 minutes a day, but I always tell people it is always more work not to do the work. Sorry, but true.
Yeah.
And if you look, and if you want to hold yourself to that, if somebody's listening and they're like, well, is it? I want people to look at the costs in their life of their core wounds first. I want you to look at what is the cost of always fearing abandonment. How is that showing up for you? How much drama is that creating in your life? How much heartache or worry or spiraling out is that creating in your life? How many times do you regret texting too often or feeling that panic and then maybe knowing that you clinged and you shouldn't have and you should have respected your own standards? There's so many things, and you can look at that for each of your core wounds. What has that betrayal core wound done for some people who they always push people away and they're always feeling betrayed and they're suspicious and on high alert and they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop and they can't relax and be themselves in relationships. Like when we really look at these things, you'll see that, geez, those core wounds, it's a lot of work not to do the work. And that doesn't even, like, when we look at our unmet needs, what does it look like in life to constantly carry the grief of unmet needs in your life and to constantly put over, amounts of pressure for somebody else to meet your needs? I mean, it's a ton of work. You can look at that for each of the pillars. What is the cost of always having a dysregulated nervous system? Not knowing how to relax, not knowing how to rest, not knowing how to feel calm in the moment or communicate properly because you get so dysregulated. How is that causing you to feel like your relationships are spinning out of control or you're not being able to reach people that you really want to because you can't stay regulated enough to communicate properly. So I always get people to really investigate that. And at the end of the day, it is always more work not to do the work.
And then moving on to the next pillar, is that communication?
Yes. So one of the biggest things I would see all the time is that people would come in and they would say to me, Thais, my partner doesn't listen to me. My husband doesn't listen to me. My wife, the person I'm dating for 6 months, they don't listen to me. And I would hear this all the time and I'd always be like, oh no. And then over time, what I recognize is that so many people, they just don't know how to communicate properly. So we often don't get taught. And this is a broad pillar, but I'm going to just go through 3 really high level, simple tools for communication. Number 1, most people, they go into communication. And I always say to people, behind every criticism is a need. So people go in and they say, you don't care about me. You never spend any time with me. And they say that. And what they really need is more quality time. So I always tell people we have to practice converting our criticisms into needs, and we have to positively frame them, is what the first pillar is called in terms under communication. Okay. So communication looks like, instead of saying you don't care about me, you don't spend any time with me, we might say, hey, I'm feeling a little disconnected. I would really love to spend quality time this weekend. Let's plan a fun date night on Saturday. The second pillar of the communication piece is that we want to be able to go into, painting a picture of what that looks like. So that's why I said, let's plan a fun date night this weekend, because a lot of times people would also come into me and work through some of these things and go, oh, I want support. And I want to feel more supported in my relationship. And one partner would go home and they would take out the trash and they would come back the next week and they'd say, the person didn't support me. And the partner would be like, I took out the trash every day. I did chores around the house. I did all these things. And the person who requested the need for support would turn around and say, yeah, but I needed more hugs, or I needed more affirmation. I needed encouragement. That's what support was to me. So I'm always like, okay, let's take how we communicate. Let's change it. Let's practice first actually making sure we're positively framing it. So don't say what you don't want, say what you do need. Okay, I want more quality time together. And then we say, what does that look like? Let's go on a fun date night this weekend. Or support looks like encouragement. I need more encouragement in the relationship. Now we're getting very specific. And then the last thing I say to people is that we have to make sure we actually see our needs through. Sometimes we think we communicate something once and we're like, I told you once 3 months ago, you should have never forgotten. And the reality is that people have years, decades, in fact, of different conditioning. And it's one thing if somebody never makes an effort to meet your need at all. Obviously, that's a problem. Then we have a different conversation on our hands. But if somebody is trying and showing up and they are making an effort and then they forget every couple months or, every 6 weeks, you have to remind them a little bit, that's normal. That's us just like doing the work and getting patterned in together. And over time, that will become the new normal in the relationship of meeting our needs together. But it starts with us being able to communicate properly. And those are some high-level tools that people can begin with.
So I feel like in a long-term relationship, you have a lot more, forgiveness, I guess, of people being reminded and wanting to keep moving and working together. But we find in early dating, people just giving up, exiting quickly if someone doesn't meet their needs, and saying like, it's too early to share this. They should know how I feel. And if they do it, I feel like a lot of times they won't want to do it like 3 or 4 times. What's your take on this?
Great question. So I always say to people in early dating, it is a little bit different, obviously, than in a long-term relationship. So if you're just starting to get to know somebody, I don't think we should be saying, hello, date number 3. It's our 3rd time spending time at dinner together, and here are my 14 needs I would like you to meet. Like, that doesn't go well. That's going to scare everybody away. So I say to people, first date, see if there's spark. See if there's a chemistry there. See how that goes. After the first date, we ideally communicate 1 need a date, but it doesn't look like I need this from you. It looks like, oh yeah, you know what? What are you interested in a partner? And people might say, oh, I'm interested in these things. And you say, yeah, I really value consistency. Communication and people being consistent about communication, that means a lot to me. So we frame our needs as likes, as things that are important to us, as things that we value or care about. And we tell people that at a high level instead of saying, I need you. Yeah. We're on date number 2. I need you to be very consistent with me in our relationship. I need you to change how you're behaving. Like, that's too early. So what we do is the dating stage of relationships is all about getting to see if there's a spark, giving 1 piece of meaningful information per date and asking 1 piece. And I say 1 piece because sometimes things go well and it turns into 2, but we don't want it to be a job interview. And then once we've done that, we then vet how people respond to that. If you say you care about consistency in dating and then somebody literally is the most inconsistent communicator, well then yeah, that's a compatibility mismatch because you've shared that these are important to you and you're vetting to see, is this person showing up for those things? Are they behaving that way? So it's definitely different in that early stage of dating versus in the long-term relationship, but that's how we can frame it at a higher level. And then we're ideally vetting to see how somebody responds and shows up.
Do you think, though, that you can follow up? Clearly, obviously, if they're like wildly inconsistent, that is signal. But in our opinions, we think that a lot of people hold back too early. Like, what's your take on having conversations and sharing things if, like, let's say everything else is going well, except they're not texting enough, for instance?
100%. So this will go as the dating progresses. So I take people through like our 6 stages of relationships. So we have different stages of relationships as the dating stage and the honeymoon stage, then the power struggle stage, etc. In the dating stage specifically, we are vetting people. And it's important to start framing your needs in the first early dates. But as you're moving closer and closer towards the honeymoon stage and towards more commitment, we actually set the stage for secure connection and attachment by communicating more vulnerably. So as we grow in the connection and the vulnerability, the communication has to grow along with that. Otherwise, it will actually stunt the growth and prevent us from getting into the honeymoon stage. It's one of the rites of passage to go into the honeymoon stage. So it is important, but I just do think that it's important, like, you know, on date number 2 or 3, if we're making these requests and we're not seeing anything, I get that. But if you're dating somebody and you're starting to form a meaningful connection and you've been speaking regularly and you're on date number 6 or 7 and you're recognizing that, I really like everything about this person, but the communication and consistency just isn't quite there the way I need it to be. I brought it up at a high level. I told this person that I care about that, but now I'm recognizing that unless this changes, I can't progress the relationship. Then we have to have a conversation about that. We should always be communicating before we flee, because otherwise it's just an avoidant attachment response. And so you want to be able to say, hey, I'm really enjoying spending time with you. I really like where this is going. And I'm recognizing that for this to keep progressing and us spending time this way, I need a little more consistency. That looks like, paint the picture, right? That looks like us having an evening exchange before bed every night, like texting each other before bed. I want to stay in touch more regularly each day. Are you available for that? Is that something that you're able to do in our connection? And if the person's like, no, I'm not looking for that, I don't want that, that's too much pressure, that tells you a lot, and then we can go from there. But if somebody's like, yeah, I'm going to work on that, then that was communication gone right. That was how we should be communicating, working through things. But it's once you establish more of that connection as time goes on.
And what comes after communication?
So our very last pillar is boundaries, okay? And at a high level, each attachment style has a very unique relationship to boundaries. I kind of mentioned this in passing earlier. Anxious attachment styles kind of are boundaryless a lot of the time. They just say yes and they people please kind of into oblivion. And then they'll sort of set boundaries with guilt, or they'll say, do you mind if I have a boundary, please? Hopefully it's okay. And that's not really a boundary, right? When you're speaking in that way. Dismissive avoidance, they're like so extreme with their boundaries. Instead of saying, hey, I'm feeling a little tired. Can we just stay in tonight? I have a boundary. I can't really go out this evening. Instead, they'll say, I'm not coming over, right? They just set these like survival boundaries. They cancel plans altogether instead of saying what they actually need to experience there. And as a result of these things, we'll see even fearful avoidance. They tend to start off boundaryless. Then they get angry. Then they usually set boundaries from anger. And then they feel guilty about it and they go back to being boundaryless, and it just goes in a nice little circle, a nice little loop. So each attachment style has to rewire their relationship to boundaries. And just at a very high level, one of the great tools we have for that is first rewiring your core wounds around boundaries. Sometimes you're afraid to set boundaries because you think you're then going to be abandoned. Or you then think, oh, I'm going to set a boundary and I'll be disliked or rejected or unsafe if you were punished a lot as a child for having boundaries. So we have to change those core wounds. Then we practice exposure work on boundaries, small boundaries over time with easy people until we're getting this practice of repetition and emotion at a subconscious level. And then the needle moves, and then we get into a space where we're able to set healthy boundaries in all types of situations because we've done that practice work first.
I mean, this conversation has just been so fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much in this short time, and this might be one that people have to listen to like a few times over. I think overall, my biggest takeaway, and maybe criticism with attachment theory before talking to you, is that it always did feel like kind of inactionable. Like it was like, I must be secure and I won't date until I'm secure. I can't have a relationship until I'm secure. And I'm curious, like your take, Thais. My guess is that you think that you believe you don't have to ever be 100% secure and it's always a work in progress. But I see you nodding. So
100%. I mean, so here's the first thing. A lot of the work I ended up doing with people for years first was literally about people getting into relationship and being in a position where they did the work in the relationship itself. So like that was more often than not the way people came, and you can become secure together and do this work together, always, at any point in time. But obviously it's also easy and good if you do the work ahead of time, you do a little bit of it. And then if you're not fully secure, you can do the rest of it in the relationship anyways, because it's going to be required of you. So no, there does not need to be this, specific moment where you're 100% secure to then be with somebody. I think that's silly. I think that's actually detrimental to people believing and feeling that way. And the other thing too is I fully agree with you so wholeheartedly. It's like my pet peeve right now is people are like, I'm this attachment style, so I'm just going to be this way. And it's like, no, it should be, I'm this attachment style, so here's the work I'm going to do. And that's going to better both myself and my relationships.
And I mean, I think that at the core of it is the big takeaway of like, this is core relational work. And you said it really well. It's like, if you don't do it, it's going to show up. And there is like the fact of not doing it. So we have to choose like our heart here. Like, are we going to live with all the stuff that not doing the work brings up versus actually confronting our relationship to others, but also relationship to self? And my personal take too is this like far exceeds even dating and relationships. Clearly it really gets into dating and relationships because you're relating to others. But I think it's just how you see yourself in the world, your confidence, how you approach your job, your family, like every other aspect of life as well. So I think this is just so core that people take the time to really look inward of like where the relational skills can be built in this fact of tying core wounds to attachment theory and like what this means for just how you operate in relationships.
100%. And exactly to your point, it's because a lot of this work is ultimately the relationship to yourself. So it will go with you into your career and your limiting beliefs there and core wounds there. It will go into your boundaries at work. It will go into your boundaries around money or wounds around money. It goes into literally career, financial, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical relationships. It goes into all areas because your attachment style ultimately is governing the relationship to yourself first that you bring into every area of life.
And it just dawned on me that for so many years, we've been working on coping mechanisms. It's the affirmations, the self-soothing, the regulation of your nervous system. It's the self-love that we've been preaching on Instagram for so long. And I think it's so on brand for the year of the fire horse to say, let's shed the superficial layer, which the coping mechanisms definitely do help, but let's shed that layer and let's get to the bottom of what's causing all of this. Like, let's get to the core triggers and let's address the underlying issues so that we no longer need to use the coping mechanisms. We can actually address it from the inside out. So that's why I really appreciate this conversation, because you're giving people tools to not just alleviate the what you're feeling, the triggers in the moment, but also let's rewire your core beliefs and your core wounds so that you're set up for success for the future in a very sustainable way.
100%.
Well, thank you so much, Thais. For people to find more about you and your book, can you kind of share some info of where people can get in touch?
Yeah, so I have a new book. It's called The New Attachment Theory. It's about rewiring your attachment style to heal. And I love so much what you said is that it's about actually not just coping, but really going in and doing the underlying work is the most important thing. And we go through all of how to do that. But then we also have all of our online programs that are these 90-day cycles that are helping people rewire their attachment style across 90 days. Those are at personaldevelopmentschool.com. And I am at Thais Gibson Personal Development School and on Instagram at The Personal Development School. And just thank you both so much for having me. This was such a lovely conversation. And I just really appreciate you guys being here.
Awesome. And we will link everything in the show notes. And this book just sounds like the perfect companion to How to Be Dateable. You got to read and understand first yourself and how you relate to others, and then at the same time take on dating. So make sure to pick both up wherever you get your books.
So great. We're going to wrap up this conversation. Stay dateable.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is only $2.50. So you can get your gym gains on or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.